You want to hear an embarrassing story? Yes, of course, of course. I remember I was traveling. I don't even know where I was traveling. And because bathrooms on the planes are very small, I decided I'm going to use the bathroom before getting on the plane. This is a travel tip for you for free. But I decided to use the bathroom, and I went into this is not a creepy story, I promise, but it's a bit creepy. But I went into what's it called? The bathroom stall, right? Yeah. And I didn't even, just about as I closed the door behind me, there was a voice from the bathroom stall on the left saying, "Hey, what's up?" And I don't know what's happening in the ladies' bathroom, but in the men's bathroom, we don't talk to each other, okay? You just shut up, and then we can talk outside. So we don't talk in the men's bathroom. And so, but it was at the Berlin airport. And it's like, of course, it's Berlin. You never know what's happening in Berlin. So there was a guy who wanted to talk to me. And so I felt like it was rude if I don't respond. So I was like, "Yeah, what's up with you, you know?" And the voice said, "What are you doing?" I was like, "That's a bit weird." And I said, "What do you think I'm doing? Like, mind your own business, please." Yeah. And then the voice said, "Do you mind if I come over?" I was like, no, please stay over there. And then the voice said, "Dude, I'm going to call you back later. There's a guy next to me. He's answering all my questions." So, do you know how our words can just get us into the most awkward situations? Has that ever happened to you? Is it just me? Right? Yeah, just our words, just awkward. I was at a party, and I was excited to see the person, and I think I just said it wrong, but I ended up saying to the person, "Hey, you are here. Who invited you?" Like, that's just rude, right? Like, you're not supposed to be here. But I didn't mean, anyways. Here's another one. I was doing a wedding not too long ago. Did the ceremony? They said yes. I do all of that. You know, stayed a little bit for drinks and then decided to go. And as I do, I say goodbye. Enjoy the rest of your party. I said goodbye to the bride, and she was full of appreciation. And she, "Thanks so much again for this. It was great. We loved it." And then I don't know, brain fart, you know, like I just said, "Hey, anytime." As if she is planning to do this more than once in her life. You know, it's like we just prayed for them that this is going to hold for life. And now it's like, "Hey, you know, if it doesn't, call me for the next one. The third one's for free," you know, like, oh my goodness. So how many of you have ever done this? You said the wrong thing at the wrong time, right? The rest of you are liars. You should repent. We are in a series on the Gospel of Mark at the moment. And in this series, we just go kind of chapter by chapter. And today is kind of the last part of this series. I know we're not through the Gospel of Mark yet, but next week we have a guest speaker. Joel Virgo is here from Brighton. He's going to speak next week. And then it's Advent already. So we're going to pause the series now and then pick it up again in the new year, okay? But today we have a story where two disciples find themselves in a very awkward situation because of something they said, a wrong word said at the wrong time, actually a wrong question asked at the very, very inconvenient timing, and it's really awkward to read that story. So you're with me? You want to read the story? So if you have your piece of paper on your contact card, we're on Mark chapter 10, starting in verse 32. You can also read along here on the screen. Mark chapter 10, starting in verse 32. It says, that's Jesus and his disciples, they were now on their way to Jerusalem. Let me pause right here. So far, almost all of the first few chapters of the Gospel of Mark they took place in the north of Israel, in Galilee. A few stories here and there that were somewhere else, but we were in the north of Israel, and now they were on their way to Jerusalem, which is where the second part of the Gospel of Mark almost exclusively takes place. Okay, so our second part of this series that we'll do next year, the setting of this will all be in Jerusalem. And now this chapter is a transition chapter like this. They're going from all the ministry and all the great stuff that happened in Galilee now to a very different kind of ministry, a very different kind of purpose that Jesus had. You know the story. He went to Jerusalem to die on a cross. Like, we're going to look in the next part of the series on how all that happened, okay? But they're on their way there to Jerusalem, and it says Jesus was walking ahead of them. Now, if you know where this is going. Like, I think it's just a remarkable picture of Jesus, not just going for a stroll, but he was a man with a mission on his way to the cross, right? Walking ahead of his disciples. Come on, guys. This is where we have to go now. This is why I came, to go to Jerusalem now for such a time as this. He was unstoppable, right? And then it says, taking the 12 disciples aside, Jesus once more began to describe everything that was about to happen to him. He wanted to prepare them. This is now the third time in the Gospel of Mark that Jesus tells his disciples what is about to happen. He says, listen, we're going up to Jerusalem where the Son of Man, he's referring to himself, will be betrayed to the leading priests and the teachers of the religious law. They will sentence him to die and hand him over to the Romans. They will mock him, spit on him, flog him with a whip, and then kill him. But after 3 days, he will rise again. Let's pause right there. If you were one of the disciples, if I were one of the disciples, and Jesus would say this to me, I would be terrified. It would scare me to death. And also, I would say to Jesus, if that's what awaits us in Jerusalem, why are we going to Jerusalem? Let's go into the wilderness. Let's disappear from the radar. Let's hide in the cave. This is preventable, right? This doesn't have to happen. Like, why are you walking into the hands of the enemy? And you would think that's kind of the thoughts that's on the minds of the disciples. But now we'll see the very awkward timing of James and John asking a question that is saying the wrong word at the wrong time. If you want to read with me, it says here, then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, they came over and they spoke to Jesus. And they said, Teacher, we want you to do us a favor. What is your request? Jesus asked. They replied, when you sit on your glorious throne, we want to sit in the places of honor next to you, one on your right and the other on your left. I mean, talk about inappropriate timing, right? Talk about saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. This is so just insensitive. Like, Jesus is talking about his death, he's talking about the cross, and they are thinking about the crown. Jesus says, you have no idea what you're asking. Are you able to drink from the bitter cup of suffering I'm about to drink? Are you able to be baptized with the baptism of suffering I must be baptized with? That's a bit cryptic language, but he's saying, in other words, the seat of honor that you want to sit on is costly. Okay? It's costly. Are you willing to pay the price so you can sit on the seat of honor? And they are saying, oh yes, we are able to pay that price. Then Jesus told them, you will indeed drink from my bitter cup and be baptized with my baptism of suffering. Again, something a bit cryptic, but he's predicting here the manner of suffering and the manner of the death that awaits James and John. We know later in Acts chapter 4, you can read that James was killed by the sword, by King Herod. And we also know that John, he was exiled at old age on the island of Patmos, and he died isolated and lonely. Like, they suffered, and Jesus was saying, yeah, you'll have it coming. But even then, he says, I have no right to say who will sit on the right or who will sit on my right or on my left. God has prepared those places for the ones he has chosen. And then it says, when the 10 other disciples heard what James and John had asked, they were indignant, either because they said, James, John, this is so inappropriate. Why can you ask the Lord this question? Or because they said, oh, shoot, they asked him first. We wanted to sit on the seats of honor as well. And now we've, they got dibs on the seats of honor, and we've missed our chance. And now they get to sit there. And they were jealous. And they had a bit of an ambition, a competitiveness going on there. And then it says, so they were arguing, and then it says, so Jesus called them together again. Oh, guys. And he said, you know that the rulers in this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. Not much has changed in 2,000 years, has it? We still see rulers in our world trying to flex their power. But he says, not so with you. And then he teaches them a leadership lesson. He says, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must serve everyone else like a slave. In other words, a kingdom promotion will often look like worldly demotion. A kingdom promotion will often look like worldly demotion. And he says, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So it's quite a story, isn't it? So Jesus was trying to prepare his followers for that which is to come. He wanted to prepare their hearts and their minds. Like, this is not going to be easy, guys. And all they are thinking about is their own status, their own power. And this is not even the first time that among the disciples they were having arguments about this. Because they've argued about this before. Who is the greatest among us? Who is the most important among us? Maybe you want to write this down. Ambition is a dangerous thing. I'm not going to write this down. I believe in ambition, some of you are saying, right? Ambition at its very best is a very good thing. Ambition at its very best, it fires up your motivation and your courage for you to pursue your goals and develop your skills and all of that. It's better to be ambitious than lazy. Of course. But ambition also has a shadow side. Ambition also has a shadow. Ambition at its worst can make us feel entitled, can make us feel presumptuous, can make us feel competitive. Entitled, presumptuous, competitive. Jesus is talking about suffering. They are talking about their status. Jesus is talking about ridicule. They are talking about their rank. Jesus is talking about the cross. They are talking about the crown. They were on an ego trip, and that ego trip tripped them up. Okay? Yes, I know. So what happened? James and John, they went to Jesus and says, can you do us a favor? And he said, what do you want? And they said, can we put in our reservation for our seats in heaven? We want to sit with you. I want to make sure we have our seats right next to you. And it's sort of, the Germans among you, for you, this is not a big deal, because when you go on a holiday, right, the British people are frustrated already that this is happening. But when German people go on a holiday to Mallorca or Ibiza or somewhere in Spain, like the first thing we do in the morning, right before we go to the breakfast buffet, we take our towel, we go to the beach or to the pool, we put the towel down to reserve our spot. Don't look at me like you're not doing this, guys, right? And the British people hate us for this because they are still drunk and they are not as early risers as we are. I'm sorry. But I had to, yes, now you're awake, right? So basically, I'm saying, James and John, they were saying, Jesus, can you put the towel down for us on the seat on your left? And I'm joking, guys. I'm joking, okay? But you know that's true, though, right? How many of you, just by show of hands, it's church, you have to be honest, how many of you have put the towel down on holiday? You're American. What are you putting the towel down? That's funny, though. That's funny. Anybody over here put the towel down? Yes? No. Some of you are not. Yes. The Germans know what I'm talking about. All right. Now, guys, focus. Up to this point, we have to give them some credit. Up to this point, James and John, they actually were privileged a little bit like Jesus. By Jesus, they were actually James, John, and also Peter. They were kind of the inner circle of Jesus. And last week, we had the story of the Transfiguration. You know, there were three people who were with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. Who was it? James, John, and Peter, right? We looked a few weeks ago, we looked at the story of the daughter of Jairus who had died, but Jesus resurrected her. There were only a few people in that room. Who was with Jesus? James, John, and Peter, right? They were the inner circle. And so maybe they felt like, hey, maybe we're entitled to, maybe we're deserving of some special treatment by Jesus. Because maybe James was saying to John, hey, John, the Lord keeps taking the three of us along when there's some special things happening. That means we're his core group. We're his real small group. The other ones, they just come for the pesto. But we're really his small group. We're the one he trusts the most. We just need to make sure we put in our reservation that we also sit with him in glory. And maybe John was saying, yeah, but what about Peter? Peter, Schmitter, doesn't matter, right? Don't forget about Peter. There's only 2 seats available on the left and on the right, right? We got to make sure we ask first. And that's the dangerous thing about ambition. The dangerous thing about ambition is you always want to be first. You always want to be the best. You always want to win. You want to make sure that you beat the others. You see, their request to Jesus wasn't, Jesus, we love you so much, and we just want to be near you. Can we please sit near you when we sit at the heavenly banquet? We just want to be near you. That wasn't their request. I don't think so. Their request was not, Jesus, we love you, but Jesus, we love us. We want to be seen. We want to be recognized. We want to be admired. We want to be served. We want to elevate our reputation through yours. We want you to help us build our brand. Can you do that for us, Jesus? The Bible has a word for that. It's called pride. There's a definition on the screen here. Pride is the concentration on self. It's the desire for attention. It's a sense of entitlement. The Bible has a lot to say about pride. When you're always trying to evaluate your standing, you're always trying to add things up, you're always comparing, like, am I getting what I think I deserve? Do I get the recognition and the admiration that I think I deserve? What do other people think of me? Am I making people envious? Ooh, right? And it's like, it's always about me. You're very self-concentrated, self-focused. How am I looking? Pride is very easy to spot in other people. Isn't it? It's very easy to spot in other people. You all know people that you maybe come to mind right now. Like, he or she's very prideful. Like, you all know people who always boast and brag about everything they have accomplished or what they have achieved or the experiences that they have. Like on their Instagram, look at my 5th holiday this year. Look how I put the towel down. Right? Yeah. Like, we all know people like this. We all know people who always seek attention over connection. They're not interested in relationship. They just want you to be impressed with them. We all know people who are too good, like they always know everything better. They don't want any advice. We all know people who maybe struggle to admit to any mistakes. They always hide their mistakes or blame somebody else for their mistakes. It's never their fault. Like, they're just perfect, right? It's easy to spot pride in other people. The problem is we very rarely spot pride within ourselves. It's like I don't know many people who say, yeah, I'm quite a prideful person. Like, no, everybody thinks of themselves as humble, right? I know you do, I do too. But, pride, someone said pride is like carbon monoxide, the carbon monoxide of all the sins. Pride, it hides so well that it sneaks into the room and you don't know it's there, but it's slowly killing you. Carbon monoxide, it's just there and you don't even know it's there, right? And other sins are very obvious. All the other sins are much more obvious than pride. Like, when you commit adultery, you know you commit adultery. It's very obvious. Like, you don't wake up in the morning, it's like, oh, you're not my wife. No, you know when you commit adultery, right? When you steal money from your employer or something, you know exactly what you're doing. It's not like you open your wallet and it's like, oh, I don't know where all that money is coming from. You know exactly where all that money is coming from. But pride, it hides itself so well, you don't even know it's there. The other day, Jenny and I, we were at a coffee shop, and it's one of those hipster coffee shops, which I have an appreciation for, very quirky, cool-looking coffee shops. But this one was one of those a little over-the-top, very snobby kind of, everything was organic and local and eco-conscious and gluten-free and laptop-free and self-righteous and all. You've been to those places. Some of you live there, right? And the girl who was making the coffee said, you guys want oat milk or almond? And I said, just regular cow milk? Is that okay? And she said, you heathen. How barbaric. Cow milk, right? We thought it was quite funny. So we got a coffee with regular milk, which I'm sure they just had to open for us and then throw it away. But that was, and we enjoyed the coffee. And we were laughing about it. It's like, oh my goodness, everything's so pretentious and so self-righteous in this super hip coffee house. And then we said, we're so glad we live in Charlottenburg. We don't need all this pretense. Like, we're just better than, and then it hit me. Oh my gosh, as soon as I think I am better than one of those hipster snobs, it makes me even more of a snob. Yes? Yeah. And, like, come on, like, do you sometimes look down on people who look down on people? Do you sometimes point your finger at people who are pointing their finger at people? Right? Do you shake your head at people who are shaking their heads at people? Let's just be really honest. How many of you, just like me, when you read the story of James and John, when you were reading those lines, you could feel your eye just kind of flickering because you wanted to roll your eyes at James and John, as if you would say, oh, they are so daft. I would never ask the Lord such a stupid question. No, I know better than to ask the Lord in his hour of need such an insensitive question. I would never. I'm just saying, it takes a certain amount of pride to read this story and roll your eyes at James and John. I'm not saying this to offend you. I'm just saying you to point out how pride hides so well and it slumbers inside all of us. Okay? So how does Jesus respond to their request? He says, you guys have no idea what you're asking. He's saying, before there's a throne to ascend on, there's a cup to drink from. He's saying, suffering precedes glory. He's saying the pathway to honor is a pathway of sacrifice. And he's saying, that's why I came, not to be served, but to sacrifice, to give, to suffer for you, to serve you. Let me read to you again verse 45, and I just want to stay there for the rest of our time with this amazing verse of Jesus' mission, why he came. He said, the Son of Man, that's himself, did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. These last 10 words, I counted them, you don't have to recount, it's 10 words. These last 10 words are the key to our pride problem. They are the key to our life. They are the key if you want to understand what Christianity is all about. Maybe you came to church today and somebody brought you along, you're not really sure what this is all about. Maybe you've heard us sing about the gospel of what Jesus did for us, and you want to know, what is that? What are you guys singing about? Maybe you want to know what Jesus came to do. Maybe you want to know why he came to do it. It's all in these 10 words. If you understand these 10 words, you understand Christianity. You understand why we do church. You understand why Jesus. Okay? So I want us to just dwell on this a little bit. If you look closely, he says, well, Jesus came to give his life as a ransom for many. That's what makes Jesus different to all the other founders of other religions. He says, I came to give my life. In other words, not just I came to die, but I came to be killed. That's different. Every religious leader eventually died, right? But like we think about Mohammed, Moses, Confucius, Buddha, they all died at old age, very respected, celebrated among people who admired them. They died quite victorious. They died the kind of deaths that we all hope that we will one day get to die, like appreciate it and all that. Jesus, on the other hand, he was put to death. He died alone on a cross, mocked, he says, ridiculed, rejected. He died defeated, not victorious, defeated. He died like a loser. And no wonder people say, that's why Christianity doesn't make sense. Your guy lost. Your founder was killed. It doesn't make sense. Like, why are you celebrating? Why are you wearing a cross? It doesn't make sense. Your founder was defeated, right? It doesn't make sense. And guys, we need to understand why he died, not just that he died, but why he died. If we don't understand why he died, why he was willing to give his life, the whole thing doesn't make sense. It's just a joke. It's ridiculous, actually. That's why even Paul writes to the Corinthians. He says, the word of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, for those who don't believe this. But to us who found salvation in this, it is, he says, the power of God. In other words, he's saying, I know it doesn't make sense. It's ridiculous to put our faith in the guy who was defeated. But because we by the grace of God, were able to understand why he did it. The mystery has been unveiled, and we now know this is the power of God. This is the best thing that ever happened in the history of the world. So why did he die? Two things I want to look at. He tells us in this verse, he says, he came to give his life as a ransom for many. If you want to circle that word, for. He did it for us. He did it for you. He did it for me. And maybe you ask, well, what was he trying to prove? Why did he do that? Why did he do that for me? And the word here, for, does not mean in the sense of here is a gift for you. Here is something I've done for you to prove my love for you. But rather, the Greek word here is anti, which means in the stead of. For means in the stead of, in our place. He gave his life as a ransom in our place. Let me try to explain it, because I know you're like, what's Dave on about today? Imagine after this service, we're going out back here and we go for a walk down the Spree River, which is a beautiful, it's a river. Let's say we go for a walk, and I'll say to you, I just love that you're part of the church. It's such an honor for me to be your pastor. I love being the pastor of this church. In fact, I want to prove to you that I love this church so much. And the next thing I do is I jump into the water. Now, would you say, oh, wow, he proved his love for me. He even jumps into the water. No, you wouldn't. You would say, oh, gosh, let's pray for Dave. He's lost it. He's gone insane. Like, he needs a break. What's wrong with Dave, right? It doesn't make sense if we think of it as like, let me prove to you how much I love you. Now, let's imagine, okay, you with me? Let's imagine the Spree River is full of ice and sharks, okay? Let's just imagine it's really scary, okay? You with me? It's actually, yeah? Actually, we don't need ice and sharks because I'm sure just jumping into the water is deadly anyways because it's so dirty. Okay, but let's imagine we're walking down Spree River and we're not talking about how much I love you. We're just having a conversation about what we're going to eat for Pesto Sunday, and suddenly you fall into the water. And none of the other people want to get their clothes wet. And I say, oh, she's drowning. And then I jump into the water. I take the place, you see what I mean, in the water. And I save you and I help you get out of the water, but I drown while saving you. That's what Jesus, I took your place, you're safe, I'm dead. I would be safe if I wouldn't have done it for you in your place, right? That's what Jesus is saying. I came to give my life for you in your place. Guys, we have to understand, spiritually speaking, there is a river of destruction coming for us. The punishment that is for us, deserved even for our sin. And there's no way we can get out of the water. But Jesus jumped into the water. It's like, I'll take that place. You can get out. That river can come over me and it will kill me, but you'll be safe. That's, once you understand, I know it's a poor example, but once you understand this a little bit, that's why Jesus is our distinguished hero and not some pathetic loser on a cross. He's our hero because he's done it for us. Undeserved. Right? Now, when you realize this, maybe you want to write this down. When you realize he took your place, you start to see your depravity. You start to see your depravity is a bit of a theological word. It means, the Bible describes it as you are dead in sin. You are dead in sin. In other words, you are unable to even save yourself out of the water. And maybe you're reacting to this, what I'm saying right now. He's like, hold on, Dave. I don't think there's a river of destruction coming for me. I can manage all right. I'm not as doomed as maybe some other people in this room, right? But I'm quite a good Christian myself, thank you very much. I go to church. I'm here almost every Sunday. I go to a small group. I serve in the church. I give money to the church. I try to behave. I'm a decent person. What are you saying? Like, I'm okay. Listen, as long as you pride yourself in your own efforts, you will struggle to see your depravity. Let me say it this way. As long as you pride yourself in your own effort, you will struggle to see that what Jesus did on the cross for you was necessary. The other word I want to look at with you is the word he came to give his life as a ransom. A ransom for many. What's a ransom? When you think of the word ransom, maybe you think of some TV show, maybe or maybe some kind of like a kidnapping or something. It's like, oh, a ransom must be paid. It's not wrong to think of it that way. But a ransom, maybe the way to think of it was back then, at the time back then, when there was a war between two armies and one army lost. The soldiers that survived, or the soldiers that survived from the defeated army, were either killed on the spot or they were put into lifelong slavery for the winning nation. Does that make sense? So if you were fighting in the war and you lost, you either were killed or you became a slave, okay, for the rest of your life. And there was no way for you to ever be released unless your king in your home country says, I'm going to pay the ransom, which was normally an enormous amount of money. They wouldn't really pay that. It's like, okay, it doesn't justify it. They wouldn't pay that unless the king would say, oh, but he's really valuable to me. Like, he's valuable to me. I need him back in my kingdom. Yeah? Think of it this way. When Jesus says, I came to pay the ransom, that means he paid a price to set you free out of your slavery. You and I, spiritually speaking, we are prisoners of war. And we have lost the battle against sin. And now we are ruled by sin. And we are enslaved to sin. And there is nothing we can do to actually get out of this condition that we have unless the king would come and pay the ransom. And the ransom for us wasn't money. The ransom for us was the life of the son of the king. Do you know how valuable you are? Jesus says, that's how valuable you are to me. Like, I am happy to pay that price for you. I'm going to give my life so that you can be freed. I choose you to be freed from your condition of slavery so you can be released again. You can be home again with the Father, even if it will cost me his life. Jesus says, I love you so much, I'd rather die than live without you. I'm happy to pay the price because you're so valuable to me. You know, and when you think about this, I'm wondering if James and John, who asked this ridiculous question, maybe they didn't know their value. You know what I mean? Like, maybe they asked this question, and obviously it reveals this desperation that they have for status and position and admiration and all the things we talked about. Maybe behind that, what that unveils, kind of uncovers, is those kids. What that uncovers is like an insecurity in them, that they didn't know their value. I want to ask you, do you know your worth? Do you know your worth? I don't mean your net worth. I mean your self-worth. Do you know what you are worth? Do you know how valuable you are? What determines value? Value is determined by the price that someone is willing to pay. Right? If you've ever tried to sell something on eBay, it doesn't matter how valuable you think that whatever you're trying to sell is, that thing is. The value of what you're trying to sell is determined by the price someone is willing to pay. And sometimes what you hope for is that people start outbidding each other, and it's actually more than this is actually more valuable than I thought it is. Some things you end up giving away for free because, like, apparently nobody wants this. It hasn't any value, right? Now think about this. Your price, your value is set by the price somebody was willing to pay. And when Jesus gave his precious life for you, you hear me? Like, nobody has ever paid a higher price for anything than the price that God paid for your release. You are of inestimable value to God. Don't let anybody ever tell you that you are junk. Jesus did not die for junk. You are so valuable to him. And when you realize, maybe you want to write this down as well, when you realize that he paid the price for you, you start to see his affection. Not just your depravity, but you start to see his affection. You start to see how much you are cherished by Jesus. You start to see how valuable you are to him. So here's what I want to encourage you to do. Look at your depravity. That takes an honest look. But also look at his affection. How do you do that? How do you look at that? Look to the cross of Jesus. When you look at the cross of Jesus and you start to look at the cross of Jesus for a while and think about that he's done that for you, I don't know about you, but I come to the conclusion to say he wouldn't have done it if it weren't necessary. But also he wouldn't have done it if he wouldn't love me. You start to look at your depravity. He wouldn't have done it if it weren't necessary. But also you start to look at his affection for you, how valuable you are to him. He wouldn't have done it if he wouldn't love me. Tim Keller, maybe some of you know of him, an author well worth recommending to some of you to read. He has this quote that summarizes everything I tried to say to you in the last 30 minutes. It's very frustrating when smart people just say one sentence and it summarizes an entire preach. But he says, we are more sinful and flawed than we ever dared believe, and yet we are more loved and accepted than we ever dared hope. More sinful and flawed than we ever dared believe. Look at your depravity. But at the same time, more loved and accepted than we ever dared hope. Look at his affection. And your depravity and his affection, these two things are the 1-2 punch that our ego needs, so that we can finally kind of land from our ego trip, that trips us up, and we realize, I don't need to be recognized. I don't need to be entitled. It doesn't even matter where I sit in the heavenly throne room. Like, I'm just glad I'm there. I'm just glad there is a place for me. And then you land, and then you realize you're finally free. Let me pray for us. I invite you to stand. Can we stand together? And then we're going to sing. Let's pray together. Jesus, we thank you that today we realize you have never called us to be awesome. We can leave the awesome up to you, and we can just be your children. And it doesn't matter if we sit right next to you or if we sit miles away. As long as we're there is a place for us. There's a place for us among the Father, and we are no longer enslaved. We are no longer drowning in a river. Why? Jesus, because you came not to be served, but to serve and to give your life for us in our place as a ransom for us and for many people here and for many people in this city that you also want to see saved. Lord, I pray that you would help us now and in the coming days, weeks, Lord, to look at this and keep our focus on this and to marvel at this and worship you for it. And if there's anybody here who's maybe heard bits and pieces about Jesus and about you, and I want to pray for them right now, Lord, that you would reveal yourself to them now in this service as the risen Jesus who has also done this for them. That I pray that you would remind people and actually maybe for the first time tell people about how valuable they are in your eyes, and that this salvation that we talked about today is also available for them. We pray this in your name. Amen. Amen.